What's up, everybody? I am New Yorker, and welcome to episode number 3 of Cream Soda Revolutions. Today I'm going to take you guys back a little while compared to my previous 2 episodes, of course, which are both about fairly new albums. This one's about a pretty old album. Going back to the 70s, this is Rumours by Fleetwood Mac. An album that I have a lot of things that I could talk about, and I'm going to see how much I can put into one episode. This is an album that is probably well known as one of the absolute highest selling albums ever of all time by anyone. This album sold, 40 million copies? 400 million copies? Like, it's more than Diamond, and no album ever goes Diamond. This thing, I think, is top 10 for album sales ever. And I mean, it's a great album. I'm not tooting its horn. It is a really good album. It is a very commercial album, I will say, however, and that is that I don't want to say it's safe, but it's very appealing to a wide audience, I will say. So if you're into stuff that's a little more unusual, then you may want to pass this album over. However, if you like good music in general, this is definitely something that you've probably already heard. And if you haven't already heard it, what is wrong with you? Pause this, go out and listen to it. Man, this is a great album. I guess, very brief disclaimer. I have a couple unpopular opinions on this album, and I am going to be vocalizing them, and I'm going to be explaining where I come from with my unpopular opinions. But we all know the drill. I'm going to go through each song, and then I'm going to talk about the album as a whole afterwards. So, let's get started. Song number 1, Secondhand News. This isn't really an unpopular opinion, but this is one of my favorite songs on the album. I really like Secondhand News. Super straightforward. And it's a little corny, I guess, but I don't know. I like it. It's a fun song. It's a very, you know what? You turn on this album, we're just gonna have a good time, sort of feel. And I know I talked last time about how, to me, the first song of the album and the last song of the album are basically the 2 most important songs of an album for me. Or at least, if not the most important, then very close. If there's one criticism that I have about Rumours that I'm going to get out of the way, it's that the first song and the last song aren't the best first song and the last song. They're good, but they're not the best. I don't know what sort of order they could have put the songs in. I mean, I guess I personally would have put The Chain as the last song instead of Gold Dust Woman, which is what they had. As for Secondhand News as the first song, I think it's a decent choice. So I'm okay with Secondhand News being the first song. It sets up the album pretty nicely, sets up the band pretty nicely, and it's a fun song. It's an all-around fun time. Next, Dreams. This is one of the big singles off of this album. I think this is the biggest single. This is the song, more so than anything else, that if you were around in the 70s, or if you're rediscovering stuff now, and you heard Fleetwood Mac's previous album, which I think was self-titled, Dreams is the most akin to their previous album. Like, Dreams sounds fairly similar to their previous hit single, Rhiannon. There's a good reason for that. Stevie Nicks wrote both songs. Stevie Nicks sang both songs. But Dreams is a song that I'm always going to have respect for, because Stevie Nicks is very devious when she was writing Dreams, which is something that you wouldn't really expect from it. It's a little tame. It's a kind of on the borderline between being a ballad and not being a ballad. Pretty standard classic rock tune. Except it's one chord. Like, there's no chord progression in the whole song. It's one chord. And if you don't have a lot of experience in music theory, songs have chord progressions. So they play, say, 4 different chords, and they repeat those 4 different chords over the course of the song. So, for example, if you've ever heard the Axis of Awesome tune, 4-chord song, or any of the songs on that they mention on there, for example, Don't Stop Believing. Don't Stop Believing has the beginning with the 4 chords. and that's chord progression. If they play those same four chords over and over again, do 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 do, and they go back to the beginning and they play that over and over again. Dreams doesn't do that. Dreams doesn't have a chord progression. It's one chord. And when Stevie Nicks wrote the song, she brought it to Christine McVie, who's one of the other members of the band, and she was like, "Hey, I have this idea for a song." And she played it for her, and Christine's like, "It's one chord," and Stevie's like, "Yeah, isn't it great?" And I love that. I love that sort of deviously, I don't want to say lazy songwriting, but it's a clever way of easily writing a song. I mean, a chord progression's easy. You just pick one chord to start on and you know what numbers the chord progression is, but I don't know. I just love that it's one chord, but it doesn't sound like it's one chord unless you sit down and you really listen to it. I don't know. It's fun. I like this song. Next, Never Going Back Again. Here's my first unpopular opinion. This is my favorite song on the album. Never Going Back Again. And I say it's an unpopular opinion because, for the most part, people who listen to the whole album a couple times don't really give a shit about this song. I do. I like this song. It's corny. It's almost as corny as Secondhand News, but not quite. Almost every song on this album is a little corny, let's be honest. It was the 70s. But the song has a bit of like a country influence to it, which normally you'd think that I'd hate that because I like all music except country. I know I can hear the angry mob outside my window right now, and this song is the most country influenced song on the album, but I like it. It's fun. It's got some folk to it. It's a good time. Next, Don't Stop. Here's unpopular opinion number 2. I don't like this song. This song had the same treatment for me about 6 years ago as Don't Stop Believing, in that it was overplayed absolutely everywhere. And I got sick and tired of this song. Not to say that I was the biggest fan of this song beforehand. I've always thought the song was kind of just, yeah, okay, whatever. Move on, That's always been my feelings toward this song. But now I mean, I'll still listen to it. It's not like Don't Stop Believing. I can't listen to Don't Stop Believing anymore. It was played way too many times in way too short a time period. Again, about 6 years ago. I can still listen to Don't Stop, but man, it's overrated in my opinion. It's a good song. It is a good song, but it's not the amazing standard-setting piece that some people sort of hold it to. It's a good kind of pop song. Next, Go Your Own Way. I really like Go Your Own Way because it's, in my opinion, the fixed version of Don't Stop. If I remember correctly, the two songs were written one was by Stevie Nicks, I believe, and the other one was by Lindsey Buckingham, who's their guitarist. And the two of them, I believe, wrote it about the same relationship, which is them breaking up. And Don't Stop is sort of the optimistic, this is the end of the relationship, but it's not the end of everything sort of feel, don't stop thinking about tomorrow, you know. Whereas Go Your Own Way is the sort of pessimistic, yeah, whatever, you can do your own thing. By the way, fuck you, you know. Um, and I love it. I love Go Your Own Way because it's so cheery, but it's like it's a really cheery and upbeat sort of song, but it's like an icy dagger in the back once you know what it means. I don't know, it's fun. I like that sort of thing. I like when musicians sort of they write something one and make it appear like it's one way, but it's not. It's totally different. Next, Songbird. This is the first real stripped down, bare bones sort of ballad. This song is super cool, for sure. It's a pretty good song, and this song will always remind me of one thing, and that's my buddy Peter from high school, because he sang this song and played the song like on keys a couple of times as a solo thing. He did it in my vocal program. I think he did it for like an end of the year assembly one time or something like that. And even though the song is sung by Christine, who's a woman, but for some reason Peter, who's a man, has a voice very, very similar to Christine's voice on this track, and his voice suited it super well. So whenever I hear this song, I always go back to thinking of Peter playing this song. I don't know. I guess that's your your required personal story of the week. But yeah, so I don't know. It's a ballad. There's not a huge amount for me to say about this one. It's a good ballad. You know, I'm not usually a fan of ballads. This is a good one. Next, The Chain. Yeah, I think it's fair to say this is probably my second favorite song on the album. The Chain is the one that you've probably heard on the radio and didn't really click in that it was Fleetwood Mac. Or it's the one that you've heard a bunch and you didn't know what it was called and you didn't know it was Fleetwood Mac. The Chain is super awesome. I love how it changes halfway through, how it goes from the beginning, sort of stompy, slower, rhythmic, pulsing feel, to then this sort of uproarious, which is a term I didn't think I would use on this show, but an uproarious sort of rock fiesta, I want to say, at the end. It's the only song on the album that the whole band wrote together, which is kind of strange because they recorded all the parts of it separately. It's super, super fun, and it really captures the emotions that were going on when they're recording this album all in one track, which is a bit of a feat, for sure. Next, You Make Loving Fun. This is a cool one. This is another one that Christine sings. This one's a pretty pop-oriented one. I mean, a lot of their stuff has some pop influences in it, but this is a very pop track. I just love the story behind You Make Loving Fun because it was she and the bassist John McVie were married, and You Make Loving Fun is about her having an affair right before their marriage ends. I think their marriage ended either right before, during, or right after this album is recorded. They got divorced, and this song is about her having an affair, but she didn't tell him that. She told him it was about their dog, and I think it was like while they were getting divorced, and she was like, "No, it's about the dog," and I was like, "What kept me sane?" Sort of ideas was our dog, and it's not. And then he only found out years later that it's like, no, it's about an affair that I had. I don't know. I just like cool stories like that, and it is a pretty solid track. This is probably the one song on this album that I had zero clue was Fleetwood Mac before I listened to this album, because it's very indicative of where they're going to go after this. Not immediately after Tusk, their next album was weird, but after Tusk, like it's sort of like, this is where the 80s is going to go, and we're going to tell you that before the 80s, Like, it's 1977, and this is what's going to happen 5 years from now, It's cool. I like it. Next, I Don't Want to Know. I don't know. There's not a huge amount for me to say about I Don't Want to Know. It's also a very campy, very corny sort of track. I don't know what I can say about I Don't Want to Know. It's fun, it is. It's really fun. I will say, if there's one problem with this track, it's that it's really the most forgettable track on the album. You could argue that maybe there's one or two others that are more, but it's definitely up there. It's kind of a little too campy and corny for its own good at sometimes. But, I mean, it's not bad. I'm just saying that it's not quite at the same standard as most of the rest of the songs on this album. Next, Oh Daddy. This one's cool. It's not about a father. It's not about a real father. It's about Mick Fleetwood, who's the drummer, and kind of the band leader in the sense that he was the one that kept them together. He's the one person who's been with Fleetwood Mac for basically the entire duration of Fleetwood Mac, from the 60s through their good years in the 70s, including this album, all the way up till, are they still touring? If they are still touring, then now. If not, then the last time that they toured. And this was Christine McVie writing about like how the hell do you do that? How do you manage to keep us together and keep your head and not let your emotions and stuff consume you? And somewhat ironically, he didn't. You know, he also got separated from his wife. I think either right before or right after this album as well. I think it was like a couple years after this album he got separated from his wife. So I think it's kind of cool how it's like how do you manage to be so strong while the rest of us are kind of weak? And it's like he's not. you know, they're all kind of we're all kind of the same. It's a very especially if you know the story behind it. It's a very we're all people are people sort of song. It's fun, and it's a pretty sweet ballad as well. I swear I'm not really proving that I don't like ballads. One day I'll do an album where there's a ballad on it that I'm like, nah, I skip this song. Most of the time I don't like it. It's a ballad. I'll prove it one day, I swear. And final song of the album, song number 11, Gold Dust Woman. I'm going to be honest with you. I could tell stories about basically every song on this album. And basically every song on this album is whoever wrote it singing about someone else in the band or themselves. But it's all about the relationships between the members of the band. I'm going to be honest, I have no clue what Gold Dust Woman is about. I can't find any information online. It doesn't have a Wikipedia page. I can't. I'm aware that's a shining example of information, but I can't find anything. I have no idea what this song is about. I know it's Stevie Nicks, but I don't know what it's about. I will say, from a song perspective, as far as sonically, it's a cool track, and it's not a bad way to end the album. Personally, I think The Chain would have been a stronger finishing song, but it isn't a bad way to end the album. This is probably the other kind of forgettable song on the record, though. So, I'm actually done a little sooner about talking about individual songs. That's the album. But I have a lot I want to talk about as far as the album as a whole. I already mentioned every song on the album is about the different members of the band talking about each other and their opinions and their emotions about each other. And fun fact. I have a bunch of fun facts for this one, so I'm just gonna list off some stuff randomly as I'm talking about this. When they were recording it, they had to separate. Like the band actually had to physically separate themselves. So the women went and got, I think, like a condo on the beach, and the two of them, Stevie Nicks and Christine McVie, lived there. And then the men all got all lived in like a beach house or something like that when they were recording this. Like they could barely stand to be around each other because they were all talking, like their songs were all written about each other. And he did a bunch of drugs. They wouldn't go into the recording studio until like 5 in the evening, and then they'd record until 2 in the morning, and then they'd go sleep and party and shit after they left. It's a very this is how the 70s were as far as the music industry is concerned, which is so different than it is now. Like now it's way more balls to the wall as far as getting stuff recorded because either you're recording it yourself in your basement and you can afford to take however long you want, or you're spending a lot of money for a recording studio. And I mean, they were spending a lot of money, but like they had to go on tour to help support recording this album. They had to play a couple dates to make a bit of money to record this album. Like it was a crazy time. It's a very different time. This is probably, in my opinion, like the golden age of Fleetwood Mac. The previous album wasn't quite as good, but it was still pretty good. And then the next album was when they started experimenting with stuff. Like Tusk has some great songs on it, but it's definitely a lot more of a weird album. And this is sort of the golden age as far as just solid songwriting for Fleetwood Mac. Like, yeah, you could argue it's a little safe. You could argue that it's kind of pop. You could argue that at that point in time, people were kind of looking for something different. But what made Rumours work is they didn't go out and say we're going to make something different. They went out and said we're going to write some songs. And honestly, one of my instructors in college said something that's super true. Um, he said it just the other day, and it's that if you go out to make music with a specific end goal in mind. So if you go to make some music and you want to make this song that has this sound, that's exactly what you want to do. It's not going to work, or at least it's not going to work as well, because you're focusing on the end goal. And music isn't about that. Music isn't quantifiable, by which I mean music doesn't fit into nice grids, and it isn't something that you can measure with your units, and it's not something that's a science. It's not. It's an art. It's about feel. It's about emotion. It's about intuition. And I can totally respect Fleetwood Mac for not saying we're gonna make an album that's different. What did they do? They said we're gonna make an album. And that's absolutely, in my opinion, the mindset that you have to have. You can focus more on different influences. You can say, like, you know what, I don't want to focus on this part of our sound. I want to focus on this other part of our sound. But in my opinion, you're not going to release anything as good. Like, you'll be able to notice there isn't the heart in it if you go out with a very particular end goal. Even if you achieve that end goal, it's not going to be the same. So I totally respect Fleetwood Mac for going out there and saying, we're going to make an album. And whatever it is what it is. And we got Rumours, which is such a good album. Compared to doing something like, for example, what Klaxons did recently. Klaxons last year released an album called Love Frequency. And I'll talk about this more when I talk about Klaxons in probably the next episode. I want to talk about them very soon. But the idea of Love Frequency is they said, look, the direction we went from our first album to our second album, we weren't super happy with. We want to go back to where it was with our first album and then go the opposite direction. And the problem was they overcorrected because they had a specific goal. They said, we're going to take these specific influences and we're only going to focus on those influences, and we're basically going to throw out a big portion of our sound. And it shows. Like, there are some decent songs on Love Frequency, but it doesn't have the heart. So I sort of have to disagree with anyone that says Rumours is a boring album, because at that point in time, people were looking for something a little different. People are always looking for something a little different. It's ever since like the 50s, people have been looking for something different. The safe route has never been super popular with the trendy crowd or whatever. But different for the sake of different is very rarely good. You have to be different because you're saying, why should I do this? I want to do this. Not, I don't want to be that. You can't sit down and say, I don't want to be this. You have to sit down and say, I want to be this. That's how you be different without being different for the sake of being different. I'm going to say the word different so many damn times. So I totally respect Fleetwood Mac for that. I'm kind of rambling on about this, but it's something that whenever I look up anything for Rumours, in the comment section, there's always this big argument between this is the best song or the best album of the 70s, and people saying this was safe and boring and I didn't like it and no one should like it because I'm always right. Yeah, but anyway, so that is the end of my discussion for Fleetwood Mac's Rumours. There's probably more that I could talk about this, but I don't know if I could get a full second podcast out of it, and I am running low on time. So I'm going to talk about my music geek for the week. And my music geek this week is evolution of a band's sound. And I want to say that because Fleetwood Mac's Rumours is a turning point for Fleetwood Mac. And when I say evolution of a band's sound, I'm probably going to talk about this also in the Klaxons episode. But when I talk about evolution, I mean how one album to the next from a band doesn't sound the same. and that's important and it's a good thing. And there's always going to be some people who are like, no, this sounds different. But it's a good thing that a band's sound evolves because it gets stagnant if it doesn't. If a band releases an album and then they release another album and it sounds basically the same, and then they release a third album and that sounds basically the same, they're gonna get hated on by the third album because it's like, well, you're doing the same thing. It becomes formulaic. It's why a lot of people don't like Nickelback, and it's why I personally don't like AC/DC, because album after album sounds the same. Not to say that AC/DC stuff all sounds the same. Some of their stuff is pretty different. Thunderstruck is a pretty different song for them, but a lot of their stuff sounds very similar over the years. Like, it's one thing if one album has a cohesive sound, but if every album has the same sound, it becomes a problem. And I'm bringing this up because Rumours was sort of the turning point for Fleetwood Mac, where you take the stuff before that, again, their self-titled album, which I believe is the album before this one, and they're this classic rock band, what we would now call classic rock. At the time it was rock, with some pop influence, some blues influence, some folk influence, and it works, clearly. People are still talking about it. And then let's look forward. Let's look past Rumours. We get Tusk. Well, Tusk has some art rock stuff, and it's experimental, and they use a bunch of different instrumentation, and it's different. And then you look after Tusk, and you get 80s Fleetwood Mac, which was the 80s. So they had way more synth and stuff like that. And then let's go back. Let's go the other direction. Let's look at old Fleetwood Mac. OG Fleetwood Mac sounds very different from current Fleetwood Mac. And by current, I mean Rumours Fleetwood Mac, because it was almost a different band. It basically was. I think Mick Fleetwood and maybe John McVie were the only members of old Fleetwood Mac. And again, Mick Fleetwood, I think, is the only person who's been with Fleetwood Mac for the entire duration of the band, or at least been with them the longest. And back then, they had a different band leader, and they had a very different sound. They were way more bluesy, way more folk-y, and way less pop and rock. And then we get the influences of people like Stevie Nicks and Lindsey Buckingham, and we get more, and Christine McVie, I guess, and we get more of the pop and rock route, and their sound changes. Their sound changes over time, and it's something that I don't know. I want you guys to think about it. Do you prefer if a band sticks with a cohesive sound, or do you prefer if the band sound evolves? Personally, I like evolution as long as you're careful. Like I mentioned last time, if you have an album that doesn't sound like you, your record label is going to say, hey, this doesn't sound like you. And I do think it's important that you don't become a totally different band overnight, which was the problem, in my opinion, with Klaxons. But, I don't know. That's me. And it has been 30 minutes. So I'm just going to do my recommendation really quick, which for this album's a little difficult. When should you listen to this album? I will say, don't listen to this album all the time. This is the sort of album that you should only crack out every once in a while. It's kind of like that one dessert that you really like. You don't eat it all the time. You eat it like once a year, maybe once every 6 months, that sort of thing. Because if you eat it all the time, it becomes stale. It's boring. This album should be like that. Listen to it whenever you want, as far as time of day or anything like that, or situation. But as far as how frequently, listen to it infrequently. Once every couple of months or so. It shouldn't be, I'm going to listen to Rumours. It should be, oh yeah, that album. I'm going to put that on. I almost forgot about that album, I totally forgot I had that album. I'm going to put it on. So this has been Cream Soda Revolutions, Episode 3, Rumours. I know this one may have been a little stagnant compared to the other ones. I was rambling a little bit because there's stuff that I'm very opinionated on, or that I'm very opinionated about. But as always, I want to thank you guys for tuning in. I am New Yorker, and this has been Cream Soda Revolutions. Good night.